If you love the faux tin look but don't have access to faux tin tiles, you're going to love this video today. Hi, I'm Chris Haughey. Thank you for joining me. A couple weeks ago, I created a pumpkin using the faux tin technique, and I learned some things, what to do and what not to do. So I decided to give it another try and just kind of take all that information and streamline it to create this acorn. I absolutely love the way this turned out. Definitely much easier than the pumpkin. This is such a fun way to upscale any project for any season. So grab your brushes and let's get started. Only a few supplies are needed. I'm using modeling paste, a couple decorative stencils, and a flat palette knife. If you don't have one, a credit card would work. I'm using an MDF acorn surface, and I thought this would be a really pretty design to put on the bottom of the acorn, and I kind of centered that big brocade design down in the center in the point. So you can move it around to whatever position fills the area best. I did tape it down to anchor it with painter's tape. Now the modeling paste I'm using is a little bit on the old. I had to scrape in the bottom, so it was a little bit lumpy. I just have to work it with my palette knife to kind of smooth it out so it spreads easily. And I'm just spreading it on. Think about how you spread peanut butter on a piece of bread. Just nice, even, smooth strokes. If you overspread it, it could encourage that texture paste to go underneath the stencil, and that causes it to be not clean, crisp edges. For this particular technique, just getting the design on there, I'm not sure the edges are that integral, but you know, you like to keep it clean. I pull it towards myself with nice, long, smooth strokes, and I did find out if it's not super smooth, that it creates more texture, and then I just use my finger or my palette knife to remove the excess modeling paste. Now, you need to make sure that it is dry before you add more over top of what you've just done. You don't want it to smear, and because it's a thicker medium, it does take just a little bit longer to dry. And I did use painter's tape to kind of mask off that top edge. Again, make sure it's super dry. I want to do the cap on the acorn. I found this mermaid scale, and I thought it looked kind of like the scales on an acorn. And so I just taped down the stencil really well and just pull that modeling paste across. It's not difficult, and it is just such a nice effect. I smoothed it out pretty well, clean those edges, make sure that it is dry really well, and then go ahead and complete the rest of the cap. And I just overlap the stencil so it blends together seamlessly. Like I said, any design stencil would work. It's more the texture than the design. I just had so much fun doing this. Make sure that once you are finished with the stencil that you clean it off, because if that modeling paste dries on there, I think your stencil is pretty much ruined. I did load my 3/4 inch oval wash with Fawn, and this is just a light tan. Any tan color would work. I'm just going for those earthy autumn colors, and I like the soft bristle brush because it goes in all those ridges very easily. And I used burnt umber on the top, and I thinned my paint down so it would smooth on a little bit easier, and you can tell it doesn't cover as well as the tan paint did, but it's always better to do 2 light coats as opposed to 1 heavy coat. And actually, after I painted this on, I found out that the little valleys in between the texture were darker. I kind of like that look, so I just made sure that it was nice and even, and I just stuck with the 1 coat of paint. Let it dry well. I have loaded my number 6 spectacular stencil brush, super soft bristles with light buttermilk. Now when I'm doing this, I just have a feather soft touch. if you push down too hard with this brush or any brush, you're just going to get a dark painted area. So it's just super light, feathery, and you can see right there I pressed a little bit harder because I'm putting layers of paint on very lightly. I'll be able to blend it in. But look how that design just almost magically appears. And I did keep my strokes going left to right just for this first application. In my mind, that gives you a more even coverage, and I'm able to have better control. I did not reload my brush. As I use the paint on the bristles, I can just increase my pressure. When you do reload it, make sure that you always go over to a paper towel to lift off that excess paint. Now that I have it covered lightly with the first coat, I'm just doing almost an slip slap, which is kind of an X stroke, and I'm trying to hit just those raised areas. And you can see how interesting, because that modeling paste was not super smooth. Look at all that beautiful, almost looks like Venetian plaster kind of effect. Love how that texture just absolutely raised and looks beautiful. Now I'm picking up some of that Fawn to put on the cap, and I'm doing the same thing, just lightly brushing it on to give a little bit of a highlight on the texture. I decided I did not like the Fawn, so I wiped my brush off, loaded it with raw sienna, and raw sienna has more of a yellow brown. The Fawn is just almost too light, so I just went back, and you can see it has kind of a golden tone to it, and I like the way that was looking. It just seemed like it was very dark, and when you're using these dark earthy colors, sometimes you just need a little bit of variety to bring out some brightness. I picked up some of the burnt umber, which is what I used on the cap, just very loosely shading that around the outer edge and then underneath the cap. I really have the paint thinned down a lot so that it goes on smoothly, and I don't have to encourage it to go through all those ridges and bumps. If you need 2 coats, it's so much easier to go back and add a second one. I picked up raw umber, and this is a really deep dark brown. I love that rustic texture. This is kind of optional. I like that grunginess. It's very primitive, but to me it almost looks like chipped aging and on the paint. And I think this just brings in another element of personality. I have a little bit of paint on my palette, sliding the flat of my palette knife through the raw umber, and just a skim of paint on the bottom of my palette knife, very lightly, just kind of rubbing it over the texture, the outer edges. You can create quite a significant impact with this. So I always back off a little bit until I go over all of it to see what the overall effect is. And then once I start diving into the texture, I can get a little bit braver, and I can go back with a little more confidence to increase or add more as needed. Now I'm going back with the same technique. I picked up some warm white. I just thought those trefoil design was so beautiful, and I really wanted it to pop. And because the modeling paste has that uneven, gorgeous finish on it, look how that just really picks up the very highlights and just makes it very impactful. Did not do this on my last project, and I love how this is turning out. Palette knife can achieve such amazing results, but it takes a little bit of patience, and back off. Do not overload it, because it will just absolutely very easily become overwhelming. Look at that little texture there. As I brighten it up, it just pops, It's not diminishing that grungy raw umber underneath. It just really adds to it and brings in that pop of highlight. I picked up some light buttermilk. I thought since that works so well on the bottom that I needed to add a little bit on the top. To me, it looks like it almost sparkles and shimmers with a little bit of light. So it takes that really dark, heavy looking cap and look at all that beautiful texture. Can't achieve that with a brush. I wanted to add a tag and I'm painting it with light buttermilk. If you have trouble hanging on, grab a stylus and stick it in that little hole or tape it down so that you don't have to worry about chasing it around. Picked up a little bit of the burnt umber, just kind of scooting it around the outer edge. Now remember, I wanted this to look a little bit grungy, so I'm letting it be very loose. I found a Tim Holtz stamp set that had leaves on it. Because this is an acorn, I wanted to use an oak leaf. I'm using the archival ink in black, and I'm just going to stamp it on the tag. Picked up some of that raw umber on the flat of my palette knife to add just a little bit of grunge to that tag. Kind of pulls everything together. I call that my connecting thread. Again, this is optional, but I just love that texture. I wanted to do something fun on the stem, and I did this on the pumpkin. I loved how it turned out. Just going to wrap it with, this is a 2-ply jute twine. And I put some hot glue down to get it started. Bring those loose ends to the back. That way you can anchor them down and cut them off, and you don't have any of that showing on the front side. This is such a great way to finish it up, and it really helps to balance out that texture as opposed to having it painted or trying to decide what kind of texture to put on the stem. Just keep a nice tight wrap on it. I put the hot glue on the front and a little bit on the back so that it sticks tightly on both sides. I am not a crafter, I am a painter, so all of these techniques I kind of struggle with. I'm terrible at hot glue. I need to get those finger protectors because I always end up getting hurt. And I just ordered in a new cordless glue gun, so I'm kind of excited about that. I think that's going to be very beneficial. I won't have to struggle with a cord. So just keep wrapping it around. Make sure it's nice and tight, that the wraps, butt up and there's no open holes. When I got to the very top of it, I just put a little bit of hot glue on there. Make sure that top is completely covered. I did make a bow. This is a wired bow, and I put a little bit of raffia behind it. I did video this, but for some reason didn't pick it up. Just using some pieces of foliage and fall decoration that I have on hand, a little bit of eucalyptus, just sticking it in to balance it out. I thought it would be pretty to have some little orange flowers. I picked these up at the dollar store. I did tie my ribbon with wire, and so then I can go in and curl the ends of it. Makes these sweet little curls. I love the way that looks. I've had these wire curlers for years, but I think you can get them on Amazon. I went to a bigger paper wire, a bigger wire curler to make bigger curls and stick them in the little arrangement. I think anything like that just adds a little sweetness. No different than painting. It's all the little touches that make a big difference. So just keep playing with it, make sure it's balanced, and it will be perfect. Everything I used is listed in the links below, so be sure to check that out. Wasn't that fun? I just love how it turned out, and I hope it's inspired you to try this technique. Remember, a little bit of paint makes a big difference, and with these simple steps, you can create something that's truly impressive. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell so you won't miss out on any upcoming projects. And if you give this a try, please let me know in the comments below or tag me on Facebook. I can't wait to see your amazing creations. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time with more tips, tricks, and techniques to make your projects easy, fun, and oh so impressive.